Before we begin today's episode, I want to take a moment to acknowledge that we will be discussing grief, loss, and the difficult decisions that sometimes come with working with dogs, including behavioral euthanasia. I know these are heavy topics. If you're in a space where this might feel overwhelming, please listen when you're ready, and take breaks if you need to. My hope with this episode isn't to dwell in sadness, but to share what grief has taught me about love, connection, and the ways we move forward. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that grief isn't just about endings. It's about what we carry with us. Welcome to Life Lessons from Doug. I'm Kari. For over 12 years, I've been immersed in the world of dogs, with 10 of those years being dedicated to professional training. My journey has taken me from fostering rescue dogs to owning and operating a boarding, training, and daycare facility. And along the way, I've discovered something profound. Our dogs are some of the best teachers we'll ever have. Through countless experiences, I've learned life-changing lessons from the dogs I've worked with. Lessons about patience, trust, resilience, and connection. But today we're diving into a lesson that isn't easy to talk about, yet is an undeniable part of life: grief. Grief has been a near constant companion for me lately. I recently passed the 1-year anniversary of losing my mom, and in that process, I've spent a lot of time reflecting, not just on losing her, but on the losses I've experienced throughout my life. I've lost more dogs than I can count. Some were mine, some were rescues I worked with, some were clients' dogs that I had come to love. And through all of that, I've realized something unexpected. The lessons I've learned in grieving dogs have, in many ways, prepared me for the monumental rite of passage that is the loss of a parent. As a trainer, I've been present for many dogs' final moments. Sometimes it was because they were old or terminally ill. Other times it was because of behavioral euthanasia, one of the hardest and most gut-wrenching realities of working in this field. Each of these experiences has changed me. Each has shaped the way I understand loss, not just the loss of life, but all the smaller losses we navigate in life too. Today I want to share some of those lessons. Because grief isn't just about death. It's about change, about letting go, about the way love and loss are always intertwined. I want to start with a story about a dog who taught me a lot about grief. His name was CeeBee. CeeBee was a yellow lab mix, strong, athletic, and intense in every sense of the word. From the moment he entered rescue, he showed aggressive behaviors in his foster home. And when I met him, I could see that he wasn't afraid, he was just too much. He was like a firework that never burned out. But he was also so much fun. When he arrived for his board and train program, I integrated him into my pack quickly. He made friends with every dog he met. He helped shy dogs come out of their shells, and he was playful, confident, and full of life. His challenge wasn't with dogs, it was with people. And that was the hardest part. Because CeeBee wasn't an aggressive dog at his core. He wasn't looking for a fight, and he wasn't filled with anger or malice. Most of the time, he was the kind of dog that made you laugh, the kind that charged headfirst into life with a tail that never stopped wagging. But every now and then, something in him would shift. It was like a switch would flip, and in those moments, he would completely lose himself. He would do things that I know he didn't want to do. Things that weren't in alignment with the dog he was the rest of the time. And no matter how much work we put in, no matter how much structure, training, and socialization we tried, there was no way to make those moments disappear. He would come back from those episodes almost as if nothing had happened, like a dog waking up from a bad dream. And that was the part that gutted me the most, because I could see how good he was. I could see how much he wanted to be that happy, fun-loving, easygoing dog all the time, but he couldn't. And that's when I had to face the truth. Keeping him here wasn't fair to him. Yes, I could have managed him for the rest of his life, but management isn't a life, not for a dog like CeeBee. He deserved more than a life of restrictions, of barriers, of never being able to just be. And so, the rescue and I had to make the decision, the one you never want to make. I sat with him on his last day, holding his paw, whispering the same thing I always do. Come back to me someday in a healed body so we can play together. And then, CeeBee, who had always been too much, too big, too full of life, gave me one last gift. Just as his spirit was slipping away, he ran through the kennel room one last time, causing absolute chaos while saying goodbye to every dog and leaving the world exactly as he lived in it. In that moment, I knew he was finally free. For so long, I had carried the weight of wondering if I had done enough, if I had missed something, if I could have changed the outcome. But in his own way, CeeBee answered me. That was just who he was. And letting him go wasn't a failure. It was the most loving thing I could do. Because CeeBee's struggle wasn't a choice. He didn't want to have those moments where he lost himself. He didn't want to be unpredictable. But he couldn't escape it. And if I couldn't take that burden from him, then the best I could do was to set him free from it. Even through the heartbreak of it, I realized something. Grief isn't just about loss. It's about love. Because if there wasn't love, there wouldn't be anything to grieve in the first place. For so long, I thought grief was about endings, about the emptiness left behind. But sitting with CeeBee that day, I realized that grief is also about love, about carrying forward what mattered. And when I lost my mom, that was the lesson that helped me the most. Because here's the thing, grief and love aren't separate. They exist on the same spectrum. The intensity of our grief is only a reflection of the depth of our love. And on further reflection, I realized something else. Grief isn't exclusive to death. We grieve so many things in life, some obvious and some subtle. And sometimes the losses we don't fully acknowledge are the ones that linger the longest. I felt it when I transitioned out of my training facility, the place I had poured so much of my time, energy, and heart into, the place that had given me my first real sense of professional purpose. Walking away was my choice, but that didn't mean it didn't hurt. That didn't mean I didn't grieve what had been. I felt it when an impactful mentorship in my life came to an end. Someone who had helped shape my path, someone whose guidance had meant everything at the time. And when that relationship faded, it left a space that was not easy to fill. I even felt it in the moments I never expected, like the night of our most recent election, when I had built so much hope around one outcome, only to wake up to a different reality. It wasn't just about politics. It was about grieving the vision I had for what was to come, and about reconciling my expectations with what actually was. And then, of course, there's the grief that comes with losing a parent, a grief that feels different from all the rest. It's not just the loss of a person, it's the loss of an anchor, of a relationship that has shaped so much of who we are. Losing my mom wasn't just about missing her presence. It was about grieving the version of myself that existed while she was still here. The person who could still pick up the phone and hear her voice. The person who didn't yet know what life felt like without her. That kind of grief shifts something in you permanently. But even in that loss, I've learned that love doesn't disappear. It doesn't fade just because the person is gone. It changes form. It lives in memories, in the ways they shaped you, and in the parts of them that still show up in who you are. And yet, just like with loss, grief in all its forms has something to teach us. It reminds us that some chapters must end for new ones to begin. It reminds us that even when we lose something, we don't lose the love we had for it. Because grief, when we allow ourselves to move through it, is what clears the way for something else. For joy. Not right away, and not in the way we expect, but eventually, in the quiet moments, in the memories that make us smile instead of cry, in the understanding that loss isn't just an ending, it's also a continuation. Because what we grieve because it mattered. And what mattered doesn't just disappear. It shapes us. It stays with us. And if we let it, it leads us forward. Grief is one of the hardest things we navigate as humans. It's uncomfortable, it's unpredictable, and sometimes it feels endless. But what I've learned is that grief isn't about forgetting, it's about carrying forward. It's about finding new ways to hold what we've lost. And it's about making space, not just for sadness, but for the love, the lessons, and eventually the joy that follows. Because no matter how deep the loss, there is always something on the other side. And when we let grief move through us instead of resisting it, we create space for something else to grow. So this week, I encourage you to sit with what you've lost, not just in sorrow, but in gratitude. Because grief isn't just a reminder of what's gone. It's a reminder of how deeply we've loved. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love for you to subscribe and share it with someone who might need it today. And if you want to keep the conversation going, you can find me on Substack at lifelessonsfromdog.substack.com and on Blue Sky and TikTok at lifelessonsfromdog. Because sometimes knowing we're not alone is the most powerful gift we can give. Next time on Life Lessons from Dog, there was a time when I second-guessed everything, especially when it came to working with dogs. I followed the rules, listened to the experts, and trusted that if I just did what I was supposed to do, I'd get the results I was looking for. But then, one experience changed everything. I handed the leash over thinking I was doing the right thing, but deep down, I knew something wasn't right, and the longer I stood there, watched my dog struggle, the louder that feeling got. That moment, one of hesitation, frustration, and eventually clarity, was the first time I truly understood the power of trusting my gut. In the next episode, we're talking about intuition, about the times we know something deep down but let outside voices override what we already feel to be true, and about how learning to trust ourselves, whether with dogs, decisions, or life itself, can change everything. Join me next time on Life Lessons from Dog. I'll see you there.